Welcome to On Air with Kash. Now, it's been a minute. A lot of our coworkers and colleagues were striking right now. It gives me a pleasure to have my dear friend Valerie Brandy, who I've had the pleasure of actually not only knowing for a long time, but we finally got to collaborate this last year prior to strikes. She's a part of the Writers Union, SAG. She's firsthand seen a lot of what the negotiations are about. So we are honored to have her on and weigh in on this. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us today. You're such a pro. I have such respect for you, and I appreciate you giving us your time today.
Oh, thanks, Kash. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, it's so fun that we've worked together and now we get to go through a historic strike as well, two strikes.
Two strikes. I know. So this is the first strike where the actors and writers unions have gotten together since 1960. And the one from 1960, that was a labor dispute. That strike ended with improved pension rights for screenwriters. And the outcome was that 5% of the net studio earnings of televisions pre-1960s would be contributed to their pension health care.
Yeah, I think we got residuals out of it as well. If I
Yes,
residuals, so we did good things last time. Hopefully we can do good things this time.
exactly. And it kind of parallels today because that was a new format because, broadcast at the time, this is still an era where we don't have VCRs, movies are going to television. That was really the strike that got actors and writers their residuals. The last time there was a writer strike, this was in 2007-8. And that was really to acknowledge, this new medium that was happening, which was streaming. Now, this is before streaming became what it is, but the internet, as far as like getting movies on iTunes and Amazon, we needed to take in a factor for that. And then 5 years later, we have House of Cards debuts. It's a whole other format for writers and actors getting compensated. And so really, I just wanted to know, just like as a writer, working as a staff writer for Disney, you've written two of your own feature films that you've also directed. So I just wanted to know, like, really just your firsthand experience in this and what you think is a fair resolution.
Yeah, I've been a member of the Writers Guild since I was pretty young. I had an interesting experience where I started in the indie world and I sold a feature script. I think I was like 21, around that age. And so, I'm still pretty young, but I do have that sense of kind of back in the day. I'm a feature captain at the Writers Guild, and a lot of people on my team. I have some who write for TV, some who write for features, and I have the strange sense of saying how it used to be. I think for me, it used to feel like if you hustled and put in a lot of work over 5 to 10 years where you are really struggling, maybe you are underpaid, eventually you reach a point where this is one of the best careers in Hollywood and you have a really stable living and you can tell your parents, hey, it's okay that I went to be an artist because I'm doing okay and I can afford my life. And I think that in the past, 4 years, I've seen that really shift. It's multiple factors converging. It's streaming and the fact that we don't have transparency into how individual shows are doing. So it's hard to say whether writers are getting their fair profit participation or not. It is for feature writers, it is free work. And I'm happy to share kind of hypothetical scenarios that show how free work is so crushing for feature writers. It's really been something that's hard to control, and it far dilutes the pay that feature writers receive. It's a real struggle. And, part of it is maybe the pandemic. I don't think that helped anyone. And I'll be fair to the companies and I'll say, like, I'm sure it wasn't helpful for them, but the Writers Guild data shows that their profits have increased. Their profits have gone up and writers are still really struggling. So what we really want is fairness. We create the product that is sold in this business and nothing happens without writing. So in terms of a fair resolution, I think we put some offers on the table that are really reasonable and they're grounded in real problems that writers face. They're not grounded in like wishes or what we'd like to have or, something frivolous. They're grounded in research. The Guild has really done an excellent job tracking what is creating hardship for writers. And some of the resolutions we're asking for are cost neutral to the studios. They really wouldn't cost them more money. And as to the ones that would cost more money, I think it's something like 2% of total profits. That seems pretty reasonable. So we just want fair pay for fair work, and we want to be able to have like so many people just stable, reasonable lives. That would be a fair resolution to me.
To break down what is exactly happening, like, you mentioned the pandemic, we've mentioned streaming. The technology is going to advance. We're going to have newer ways of doing things. I mean, that's just inevitable. But what's been happening, and it's not just in the film industry, it's with so many industries across the country. So basically, this format of now, CEOs, investors, they're taking all the money out of the system that would go to labor and mid-level management. Now they're keeping it for themselves. They're trying to, I mean, is it fair to say that the idea of the writer's room, they're trying to make that obsolete and hire one showrunner? On a typical traditional season, you might be working 10 months. You get paid weekly, you're working 9 to 5, usually more in our industry. You write a script, you get a script fee, you get a residual, and then writers would actually go to set to produce an episode. And then on set, things could change. A certain line might not work for an actor, and then you would rewrite it, get paid for that day in post. If you have to cut something, you might have to fill in something with ADR. You hire the actors and the writers, and then you participate in the show's success. There are showrunners who have done this, like Mike White. They just want one showrunner, and they want all the episodes up front instead of hiring a team for a season.
Yeah. So Mike White in particular is a wonderful feature writer. He comes from a similar background as me. For him writing his series, I think that was qualified as a mini series. Yeah, kind of a
Mike White's. Oh, yeah, I've always loved his work.
Yeah, smaller amount of episodes. That's kind of a specific thing, but we are seeing this trend towards less episodes, shorter seasons, fewer writers. Some of these writer rooms have been just a few people, 1, 2, or 3. And typically the way it's worked is the writer's room is this iconic part of Hollywood where you have all of these writers kind of coming in together, and it really was for a while one of the better jobs you could have. So we are seeing for television writers these rooms shrinking. We're also seeing that they're being kept on hold without pay for long periods of time, and they are not able to go take other jobs while they're on contract with a show. So that's really tricky. And then, coming to set, they're not being invited to come visit set. And that's where writers learn how to produce the work. And television was one of the areas where writers had more control over the work they were creating. People would be surprised with a studio feature that's not done independently. Writers actually have much less control than people think, much less control. I've been surprised, we have a lot of support out there in the world and online, but the minority that don't support, one of their favorite arguments is, well, writers are writing garbage anyway. And I think a lot of us feature writers would laugh at that, because it's like, there are a million genius original scripts floating around Hollywood, and they get a lot of us jobs, but they're not being made right now because studios are favoring IP, which is fine, but that means existing content that they're adapting in some way. And so for us, that means not a lot of control over the work, because when you're adapting IP, there's it's not really, it's yours, but it's not. It's based on an existing thing, and it's different maybe than with an original. So in television, long story short, going to set was really important, because that was a space where writers could have control over the work. You could have more creative input, and not going to set, not being invited as often to learn how to produce is really disempowerment of the writer, I would say.
This was a high-level agent says that studios regard the Writers Guild's demands for higher minimum pay and staff requirements, among other things, as simply incompatible the way that TV is made now. They're quoted as saying, the Writers Guild delusionally is harking back to a day when there were 25 episodes of Nash Bridges a year and repeats and residuals. Back-end pays existed because people in other countries were willing to watch our garbage. Americans were willing to watch repeats of that garbage at 11 o'clock at night. The real issue isn't that the medium changed. Instead, it's the job of a staff writer on CSI for 46 weeks a year. Now it's a 25-week job working Wednesday, which is better. That's just progress. I mean, that's their argument. I'm not sure if you've heard that quote.
I haven't heard that quote. That's the first time I've heard it. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yes, it's true. There are market forces that are impacting certain things, but there are lots of people making a great living off what writers are creating. And I think maybe the writers should be able to make a stable living of what they're creating.
You produce a show, maybe it gets canceled, it had mild success, and then it lives on in syndication. But there's still people getting paid for that because of what was negotiated in the 1960 strike. And their attitude is, broadcast is going out, streaming is a whole different thing, and there's no way to calculate what's happening. This is just and they're saying that what they're doing is progress. They're getting better quality for little, and they're saying, we don't need 10 writers for some. I personally think it's ludicrous, because I think a team's better.
Yeah, and that depends on the individual showrunner, but we have had so many meetings, and I've personally witnessed showrunners standing up and saying we're getting screwed over. Like they want a team a lot of the time. A lot of the time, not always. There may be some people that kind of, again, and I understand this coming from features, you kind of want your own creative control and you're like, oh, I can do that many pages, that's no problem. But generally, showrunners like having a team. They have a lot of things to do. If anyone is interested, there's a documentary called Showrunner online. And if you watch that, you can really see what their lifestyle is. It's grueling. And they're responsible for every decision that's made on a show, down to what color jacket somebody's wearing. They answer 100 questions a day, 1,000 questions a day. And writing is something where you really need like peace and time, and it's a little bit more solitary. So having a team to break the show, break the season, go away and write individual episodes, that's something a lot of these people worked towards for many years. They did the work to become a showrunner and went up through the ranks and faced a lot of years of rejection and grueling schedules and all of this, with the promise that they would have this life where they could head a show and have a team of writers. And I'm sure a lot of them are very disappointed at not being able to have the traditional writer's room. I think that's something we all really want to preserve.
I think it's necessary too. And, we talk about growth in this industry. Their argument now is, okay, because the old model was you had broadcast where you have ads running, and that's how you generate, income for your network shows. Now, and basically Netflix in the start was basically, hey, we're going to give you every television show you want, every movie you want to watch, $15 a month. Everyone's saying, oh, we're going to cut the cable. I mean, I know people who still have cable. Okay, like we said, the stock for Netflix is going up. It did go up during the pandemic. It's gone down, but it's been consistently high. People are still subscribing, and they're saying, oh, there's no way to measure it. Now, I can go down the list with different CEOs and agents and showrunners and heads of studios who are making well over 100 million. And you have writers and actors working, not even making enough to get health insurance, which you need to make at least 26,000 per SAG to have health insurance. You need 26,000 in acting jobs a year that are union work. And, you might have to work at Starbucks, Whole Foods, or, people are working 3-4 extra jobs on the side. And actors did rely on these residuals that did come through their broadcast deals. Now, certain studio heads are arguing, oh, well, there's no way of knowing and blah, but they do have success metrics. I mean, they do know which shows drive their services. They know that there's a new Stranger Things, there's going to be a growth. People are going to sign in, then, hey, they might cancel their subscription. They know what the audience wants, and they just don't want to share that information.
Yeah, I think pushing for transparency in streaming viewership so we can more accurately calculate residuals is something the Guild has asked for a while. I personally can't say why that is something that's not being shared. As you pointed out, with more traditional broadcast shows, everybody knew what was doing well and what wasn't. I'm not sure why that's something they don't want to share. Some people have hypothesized it's because all these shows are doing terribly. Like, it's all a house of cards, not the show, but like an actual house of cards, and nobody's watching streaming, and they don't want to reveal because their stocks would plummet. And I think that's a really inventive theory. I think that's really inventive. I think it's unlikely though, because we all know what shows are popular on streaming, because your friends talk about it and everyone was like, did you see the latest blank? And I also would say that companies don't put money back into things that aren't doing well. And we have been able to look at overall profit, and overall entertainment is profitable. These companies overall did really well during the pandemic. Despite what was going on, their profits went up. We have the data to prove that. So regardless of what segment it's coming from, there's 2% there to share with writers who make the only product that is sold. So
oh, absolutely. We're pulling up right now with macro trends. Now, this tells me Netflix net income from 2010 to 2013. We can start at the net income for 2020 was 2.76 billion. That was a 37.9% increase from 2019. Obviously, pandemic, people are staying home. Netflix annual income for 2021 was 5.11 billion, and that was an 85% increase from 2020. Still, we're living in a pandemic era. 2022, there was a 12.2 decline from 2021 with 4.49 billion. The net income for this quarter in June is now 1.4 billion. So we're seeing a steady increase consistently through the decade.
Yeah, that's correct. I think we had data that shows they invested 19 billion in content specifically for streaming. There is a heavy investment in streaming, and it's, I think obviously we don't invest in things that aren't profitable or don't yield. So we're pretty confident that streaming is yielding. And regardless, these companies are choosing to invest in streaming. You have to pay the people who make the thing, right? Like, if I choose to invest in a car, I go pay for it. You have to pay the people who create something for you. And again, all of our data shows that they're profitable, and certainly you can look at the earnings of the most powerful people at these companies, and they're certainly well taken care of, much more than any of us could ever imagine. So it's hard because, I think a lot of us feel, well, if I were in that situation, I would just forego my very enormous multi-million-dollar salary for a year and just make sure everybody had what they needed. So it's kind of hard not to argue that writers and actors and talent who make these things don't deserve at least to have a stable life. None of us are asking for anything extreme. I think we all just want to just have a stable life.
Absolutely, you said it. Because so there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but WGA members 11,500. So for the SAG strike, you have 160,000 actors, announcers, broadcast journalists, dancers, DJs, news writers, editors, programs hosts. The list goes on, and those are the people who are part of the union. This does affect now shutting down productions the way. So when we're on strike, this affects restaurants, it affects makeup, it affects all these other jobs that are needed. In the last writer's strike, it cost the economy of Los Angeles an estimated 1.5 billion. You have an economy that is built on this industry, and from certain studies have told me is basically you could have what this one person says: Disney won't give up 0.091% of the revenue to stop the strikes. Netflix won't give up 0.214% of the revenue. Warner Brothers won't give up 0.108. It seems like a very small request considering the top actors make more than the top studio executives. And you have, like we said, we have certain people who are in our industry who have worked their lives and they've depended on residuals and the jobs that they get to really just make ends meet and have a living for themselves and their families.
Yeah, it does seem really like a small ask. It's 2% of profits overall. I don't know, what's happening in the negotiating room. I'm not privy to, and really no one but the negotiating committee and the studio's representatives are privy to. I don't know what individual studios are offering or not offering. For all I know, there's certain studios that are saying, please, we'll give you everything. We're on board. And there's one or two that are like, no, absolutely not. I really can't say. There's rumors to that effect, but I don't know. I do know that overall it would just be 2% of the total would meet all of our demands. And it does seem like a very small price to pay. I think, when you think about what it takes for a writer to go on strike, I had people on my team worried, writing me, worried it's going to end their career, worried that, they can't feed their family. Households with two writers who are parents, households where one writer is a rep and one is a writer. So if you're a writer married to an agent or a manager, like that's something, if they only represent writers, they're suffering right now, or they're an executive. We understood that, like, it's very hard on us and it's very hard on other people in the industry. We do have the Entertainment Community Fund, and a lot of writers who can't afford to do so have personally donated, but we knew that this would just be hard on everyone, and that's why it's not something we wanted to do in any way, shape, or form. We really wanted to avoid this. We are hurting from the pandemic. A lot of writers suffered during that. This was the last thing we wanted to do, and yet it passed with a 98% strike authorization vote. That means 98% of writers, knowing how hard it would be on us, knowing how hard it would be on others, said we have no other choice. And that should let people know how bad the status of writers has been. We certainly are suffering during this time and don't want to do this. There just is no other option because the state of things as they were was untenable. And we do see this as an existential threat to the status of writers. We want to keep this a career. We want to keep this a profession for all the younger writers coming up behind us, or people who, are coming from different careers. We've had people who did other things in life and then joined the Writers Guild later in life. And they certainly deserve to come into something that's fully a functioning ecosystem and can meet at least most of their needs to just survive. So, if we don't do this and we don't solve it now, we're responsible for the death of writing as a career, and I can't have that on my shoulders. So, I think that's why a lot of us, we voted yes.
I was at Paramount last week. I was at in Burbank outside the studios, picketing and talking to other colleagues of ours. And one of the other concerns, it was interesting because AI has come up quite often. I know, like, basically a lot of the prime example everyone's using is what's happening with background actors, where they were propositioning, oh, well, you show up for a job, we pay $200, we scan you, and we put you in any movie that we want to put you in. We own the rights, your likeliness, and you'll never get paid for it. And people were concerned that that's the shift. Yeah, Tom Hanks mentioned, oh, they'll be able to, through AI, I'll live forever. Or my thing is, do you really want to see an AI Tom Cruise jump out of a helicopter and out of or run a motorcycle if it's fake?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I didn't foresee this when we took on the fight, because honestly, we kind of live in a bubble a little bit, and most people do. It's not just Hollywood. All people kind of, we're involved in our own lives. But I didn't understand originally, when this all commenced, how it's a reflection of what's going on in the world as a whole. We are not the only industry having conversations about AI. We are not the only industry where the people who make the product are being paid the least and treated the worst. These are issues that we're seeing all across the world right now. And we really have an opportunity to maybe set an example and try to create resolutions that other industries can model if we can all get together and figure it out. As far as AI goes, yeah, I don't believe that AI can ever write a script the way a screenwriter can. I think that there's this like philosophical concept of qualia. Like, how do I know your experience of experience? Like, how do I know how Kash interprets the color green? Well, I don't. I'm not in your head. It could look like red to you. I'm not sure. But I think for AI right now, we're pretty confident that it doesn't have an internal experience. There's been some debate about that too. I'm not sure. I'm not in AI's operating system, so I don't know. But if you don't understand what's fragile about being human and what's precious about being human and what's like breakable and also rearrangeable, if you don't understand that, if you don't get how people get torn apart and then put themselves back together, how can you possibly be a writer? Well, the only way is you can take old work that other people did and you can steal the elements and you can put them in a template and you can say, here you go, I rearranged it. And so far, that's what AI has done. Now, just because I think AI will deliver an inferior quality product doesn't mean that companies won't try to use it and that people won't just buy it because they're tired. And I don't blame the consumer. We all come home from work and we just want to be entertained, right? But I am afraid that companies maybe won't care if they're delivering subpar art that is just a mishmash of work that came before that has no relevance to like whatever the contemporary human experience is. I am afraid that they will just, if they could use AI to write scripts, they definitely would. Yeah, so it's a problem for sure. And as far as the actors go, we're now in a time where like we're going to start talking about what is privacy and what is your image worth to you. I don't know where any of this is going to go, but I think we're smart to tackle it now because the AI they have behind closed doors that they haven't released yet may be capable of much more than we know. And we only negotiate these contracts every 3 years. So, you brought up the previous strike about the internet and streaming and kind of what we achieved then. And I think a lot of people are like, "Ooh, we should have achieved even more." And let's not do that with AI. That would be really a shame. I think we have to think about this right now today.
And that was a very well put what you said about as far as AI and where it's going. And I mean, I'm in 100% agreement with you because I have seen simulations of, I mean, now the big thing is they're doing like live like sports events. That's the last thing that was really on broadcast, but they're moving to streaming as well too. And but you know, if you saw like an artificial Kobe versus Shaq or Michael Jordan, or if you want to do these computer simulations of what could be, nothing compares to the real thing. I mean, that's sports. And so when you, and I'm with you where I know we brought up the example about Tom Cruise, where I feel like, I mean, the thing is people want the best entertainment. That's what Hollywood brings to them. It's like they don't want to see, I'm sure there might be a market for something, or if there's a joke, or if there's, I mean, it's definitely going to interfere, I think, in the upcoming elections or in certain political campaigns, whether it's for propaganda or for commercials, certain endorsements. But I mean, I worked in voiceover and I met a lot of people who can do a spot on Morgan Freeman who look nothing like Morgan Freeman. And then they actually put a matchup on YouTube where it shows the real Morgan Freeman saying something, and then an AI version of Morgan Freeman with the voiceover actor next to it and showing how they sync it up, which is, it's scary, but it's the artificial. It's not the real thing. And when, you know, when a new movie comes out, you want to see Tom Cruise make that jump off the motorcycle and then land on the train. You don't want to see, if you know it's computer generated, no one's, or if you know it's AI, you know, you're not going to draw the crowd at the box office.
Yeah, I mean, that is yes, practical effects always, to me, I agree, look better than something computer generated. But I can't imagine doing whole movies with AI where the person themselves was never involved. I think, yeah, people have to really think about ownership of their image. And that's always been an issue. That's why we came up with residuals. It's really, they're paying to reuse your image. So this is kind of the same conversation. I do think it's interesting that when we only had cable, we would watch the show and then have commercials, and the cost of watching the show beyond paying for cable was watching these commercials. And then we went to streamers where we're paying a flat monthly fee for no commercials. And now so many streamers are talking about going from the SVOD subscription model to AVOD advertising model, where we're going to be watching commercials again. And I think, you know, I try not to catastrophize too much, because there's been so many times in this business where people have catastrophized. You know, it's like, oh, when TV came around, movies are done. When DVD went away, there, you know, we're going to lose that. I think that we always reinvent, and that's part of what makes this industry beautiful, is we all love it so much that we're going to find ways to make our art and get it out there to people. So I'm not catastrophizing about like, will there be room for art? But I do have concerns about making sure the artists involved get a piece of the pie. And there's clearly a distribution of wealth here that's not equitable.
I think some important things to bring up too is even with streaming. So, you know, we talk about how, you know, traditionally how broadcast was, you know, you'd sell, I mean, we could use Friends and Seinfeld as an example. Like during that era, that was like the sitcom era of like the 90s, the early 2000s. And, you know, you had to wait, you know, there were like 25 episodes a season. You had to wait Thursday night to watch. And then when those shows were in syndication, you could still go. It was kind of that example we said earlier where, and, you know, I've been guilty of it too. It's like, you know, hey, I just want to go to sleep. I don't really want to think too much. Oh, there's a classic episode of Friends I remember watching. I just turn on TBS. Now it's on Max, which was HBO. I mean, HBO isn't even part of the name, part of the app name anymore. But I mean, so there is a market for that. If, you know, in the older demographics who, you know, they're used to just say, hey, I just want to watch regular TV. And it's usually, you know, just their news stations, the old model. But with these new apps, specifically Tubi, so many movies are going to Tubi, and those are ad generated, where, you know, you might have like, you know, a couple commercials throughout different points. And I mean, I've noticed it too, where it's like sometimes, you know, for whatever, a movie, you know, we're in a conversation, you know, you and I were at dinner and we're talking about, oh, remember that movie that came out when we were kids? And I'm like, oh man, I want to watch it. And then I go home and I'm like, it's on Tubi. And then, you know, you'll be surprised. There's so many, I mean, just so many movies that I grew up with, hadn't heard, had forgotten about. Oh my God, I remember this movie. And you know, and I don't mind watching the commercials. I mean, especially now, it's like, okay, and I'll check my emails, or I'm a multitasker. And I think a lot of people our age, even younger now, oh, you know, I just want something in the background. And so a lot of times now, you know, I could turn on a news station, or I can get certain highlights on YouTube that I want. So I see how they all play in. But then when we were talking about the sports model, because that's really the one area that was still part of broadcast, but it is moving into a streaming platform where it's like, hey, you know, I want to see the new game or this what's airing today, for a certain boxing matches, you would have to have gotten pay-per-view. And now it's like, hey, you can log on and you get your news through Hulu, through the ABC station. And, a lot of these apps are creating that for the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a change in models. And I think when that happens, we don't want the expense to be pushed off on the artists, right? I think that we all know streaming is the future. I don't know that we're all sure how the marketplace will even out, and whether it's subscription based or advertising based, or if there's certain companies that will perform better in that space than others. Nobody can really say that, but certainly like the artist should be compensated for their work, no matter what the venue is. That's just the cost of doing business. And no product exists without artists. So that's what needs to happen. I think that, we're back at the table now, but I don't know how the negotiations are going currently. It's just going to depend. We'll see. But it's exciting that the actors are with us now as well. It's not just writers, it's so many unions in Hollywood. We have so much union support. We're not the only ones facing this. So the more that we have that support, the more it's like, yeah, everybody has to come to an agreement.
Exactly. And, like we said, it doesn't just affect it. Even you said actors and writers coming together. It's not just people like entertainers. It is like an economy. It's part of LA that will suffer as a result, because so many jobs depend on that, and I know like there's been some talk, certain people have been saying, oh, we're going to keep this thing going until people can't pay their rent anymore, or are going to start losing their houses. And, when you look at what people in that category are making, and really it's like, that's their attitude to the people who are giving them the product, to the artists that are giving them their product that is making them live their lifestyle, wipe it off like it's nothing.
I was pretty shocked at the coldness of that comment. I'm going to give that person grace and assume it was taken out of context. That's the only thing my brain can possibly understand. But I was pretty horrified by that. Yeah, and I think that the irony there is that the status of writers has been declining for a long enough period that most writers I know have already thought of other income streams to keep them going. They have different things that they do to supplement for so many of the issues that we face. For feature writers, a really big issue is late pay and free work. A lot of people don't understand why we asked for weekly pay in our negotiations. And this is actually a really interesting point that's not being discussed that often, but feature writers are paid in a lump sum typically. And this is a proposal that would be cost neutral to the studios and the companies. It doesn't cost them anything to do this, but they said flat out no. But feature writers are asking that we be paid weekly instead of in a lump sum, so that we don't have checks on hold while we're doing free rewrites, because feature writers are supposed to be paid for rewrites. And you get one check when you start the draft and one check when you turn it in. But if a producer is in the middle of that, not letting you turn in the draft because they're saying, I want this changed, I want that changed. Well, I've heard stories of that process going on a year where you're just doing free rewrites that you're not being compensated for. And your check, the other half of it, is on hold, and you need that money to live. So weekly pay would mean we commence and we get paid weekly until the full amount is done. And if they're still having us do free rewrites, at that point, at least we've been compensated. At least we've gotten the whole amount. So I think that, there's a lot of cost neutral proposals in here that would just make writer lives better. And we certainly want to resolve this, not just for writers, but for all of Los Angeles and the whole economy that revolves around entertainment. But yes, in terms of that quote about, writers losing their homes or whatever, the irony is that a lot of writers have learned to support themselves with multiple other jobs. So I think that kind of also is another way that quote is out of touch with the status of writers.
Very out of touch. I can go down the list with stuff that gets said and I look at, the person who's saying it and how they're living and what they're really doing in their personal life. That's been a big thing for me. And I think that right now, just, being on the picket, on the lines, picketing and joining our other colleagues and really hearing everyone else's story, and, you sharing your story. Someone, who's as credible as you. You know, you graduate from UCSB, you make your first feature film. It's featured at Dances with Films, become a staff writer at Disney. You've had the experience, the career, and I don't know how much we can talk about it, but you know, you do have a new feature film coming up that I was fortunate enough to participate in. I thank you for that. And is there anything you can or would like to say about that?
Thank you for being in it. Yes, we have a feature I made earlier this year before the actor strike that I directed and wrote. It's called A Unified Theory of Love. And we have the wonderful Richard Karn from Home Improvement. He played Al on the show. We have Eric Eisenhower from Parks and Rec, Kash Hovey right here. So yeah, you can find us on Instagram. It's A Unified Theory of Love. And what's really special about this production is it's all artist driven. And, you know, this was conceptualized well before the strike, but it was something I wanted to do because I wanted to make a project that was artist driven. It wasn't, you know, reliant on IP. It wasn't going to the companies and getting them to finance it so that we don't own it. It really is something that was completely from the love of art and wanting to make a movie that's an original and different than what's out there. So if that interests you, you can find us on Instagram. It's A Unified Theory of Love.
Yes, and I had such an amazing experience working on this. As you know, we've been dear friends for a while. I really just fell in love with your work when I saw your first feature, Lola's Last Letter. It's you really care about your characters. You gave an epic performance as well as telling an epic story. And the thing that intrigued me, and I'm not giving any spoilers with the script, was when I read it, I was just saying this is something that's very relevant. And I know it's going to be a very special thing. It really ties into certain things that we've discussed on this show. And so it's I really can't wait for the audiences to see it. And again, it's just such a wonderful experience. I always talk about working with you and just as a filmmaker where, you know, you work with and I'm all about the collaboration process. That's what kind of gets me about a lot of, or it pretty much gets me about, oh, you know, we're going to take all your creativity and we're going to make all this money and I don't believe it's, or, you know, we just want to hire one person to carry this idea. It's like, I really saw how you worked like firsthand. And, you know, I've, you know, like I said, we've been friends for a long time. We've collaborated on stuff, but just really being on set with you, watching how much you care about your vision, but just the way that your approach to the material, you know, I mean, I remember just the first table read, I felt like, dude, this is grooving, you know, we're all on the same page. And then to really watch you take control and the way that you worked with your actors to really bring out, you know, your vision, but really wanting to know what the actors were bringing to the characters. I mean, it was just really fascinating. And it was just, I always have fun on set. You just put me on set. I mean, I'm going to have a blast anyway. When I can work with someone like you, who I care about, whose work I admired, it makes it all the more better. I'm really grateful for the experience that we had. And I learned a lot from you as I continue to do. And I can't wait for the day to come where we can celebrate this and when we can share this with the world.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm really excited. And I think that it was just so nice to work on something where all the artists were pretty free to like explore and make mistakes and be creative. And it was like an honor working with you and working with everyone else. I just really felt like we did something special. So it'll be fun to get audience feedback. Let's see.
That it will. Again, Valerie, I can't thank you enough for this time. I know there's a lot of our colleagues and friends who are going to be picketing this week, and we're going to keep it up until we have a fair resolution. Your knowledge and your insight to this particular topic is most appreciated. Is just, you know, something that's the reason why I wanted to have this discussion with you. I've talked to people. I've been keeping up on the data. I've been listening to what's been said. And so to have this conversation with you and to share it with my audience and your audience, we so appreciate you giving time out of your schedule. You always have an invite here, and I can't wait for us to start rocking and rolling again and to celebrate the stuff we've created.
Thanks, Kash. Appreciate you having me.
You're the best.
You too. See you later.